welcome to the 18th annual ceremony. Unfortunately, we have to have this each year. As you know, just 18 years ago, planes flew into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a plane was crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Would you please stand for the arrival of the color guards? Today we have the Fall River Fire Department, Fall River Police Department, Fall River EMS, the Mass State Police, and the Bristol County Sheriff's Office color guards. Chief Bullard will now pipe them in. Remain standing for the playing of the national anthem by the U.S. Navy Band. At this time, I'd like to introduce Inspector Michael Arruda, Fall River Fire Department, retired, who will tell you about the ringing of the 4-5s. Would you please be seated?
Honor guards, colors, halt! Riflemen, ceremonial parade, rest!
The striking of the 4-5s. The fire service is rich with ceremony, customs, and traditions. Our custom of rendering finally honors has its origins in the fire department of the city of New York, where many years ago, long before the advent of radios or pagers, fire alarms and daily announcements were dispatched from central headquarters to outlying firehouses by a system of bell commands and telegraph. Each different type of alarm or announcement would have its own number and series of bell strikes. When a firefighter died in the line of duty, or when some important official or personage died, headquarters would transmit 5 bell strikes repeated in 4 series, with a slight pause between each series, followed by the announcement. This was done as long ago as 1865 in the New York City Fire Department to inform the rank and file of the death of President Abraham Lincoln. The custom has continued down to the present day, and this form of rendering final honors to departed comrades is known in the fire service as the striking of the 4-5s. Begin striking of the 4-5s.
This time I'd like to invite Father Michael Racine from the Fall River Fire Department, as the chaplain, to the podium.
Let us pray. We gather this late summer morning, just as it was 18 years ago. That morning that turned tragic and deadly and painful in such short a time. It was and still is a day of pain and sorrow. The words that we echo so often, we never forget. We remember the heroes of that day, the firefighters, the first responders, the innocents who lost their lives in Pennsylvania or New York and in Washington. The lives that were demonstrated without fear or tremble in the act of courage during crisis. We remember those who have perished, our friends and neighbors, the thousands whose names are continued to be read this day. We remember the first victim, Father Michael Judge, the chaplain of the New York Fire Department. 18 years later, we gather to remember, to comfort, to reflect, to give thanks for all those who serve. During this day and the days that have followed, we continue to pray for peace, to be the beacons of light. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our country, our common values of freedom, justice, and peace. Inspire our leaders of cities and our nations to act wisely and to always pursue and enact that peace by word and example. Bestow upon all of us today and every day your blessings, our loving God. And may we live to see swords be converted into plowshares and nations not lean to war anymore. Amen.
At this time, I'd like to recognize some of the people who are here today. First of all, the elected representatives. I have Carol Fiola and Representative Alan Sylvia. Also, we have students here from Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational High School and Durfee High School. Welcome. You're the next generation coming on to back us up. Are there any Gold Star parents here today? Family members, Gold Star members, be recognized? Thank you, sir. Paul Schmidt is here. Paul Schmidt is also here. At this time, I would like to introduce the President of the Board of Directors of the USS Massachusetts, Justin Bond.
Thank you, Colonel. Good morning, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow veterans and our first responders. On behalf of the USS Massachusetts Memorial Committee in Battleship Cove, I would like to thank everyone for being here today for this rite of reflection. Battleship Cove is home of the official memorials for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and the victims of the terrorist attacks on 9/11. I can think of no place more fitting for this memorial service to be. This time I'd like to acknowledge our elected representatives who are in attendance today. We thank them all for the continuing support of the Memorial Committee's efforts. Today is officially called Patriot Day, a national day of service and remembrance that commemorates the catastrophic events that took place 18 years ago this morning. Each anniversary carries its own power and its own meaning. All make us aware of what and who we lost, and the responsibility of never forgetting. While Osama bin Laden is gone and with other victories won, the threat of another attack is always there. Those who say we should put September 11th behind us fail to realize that it's not only a part of history, but part of our lives. To those of us who will always remember where we were that day, whose lives and careers were permanently altered by those events, September 11, 2001 is a benchmark in our existence, one that can never be erased. For future generations and those who have no personal recollection of that day, we must ensure that the stories of tragedy, terror, and heroism are passed on. This memorial stands as an everlasting tribute to the nearly 3,000 innocent souls who perished on that fateful day. Among them, we honor the citizens of Massachusetts who were killed in the attacks and whose names are inscribed here before you. While a memorial can never replace what those who mourn loved ones have lost, our hope is that they may find comfort and peace amid these grounds. And for those future generations, let this memorial be a place of learning, for the day will come when most Americans have no living memory of the events of September 11, 2001. With that, I will end with a quote from President George W. Bush on the dedication of the Pentagon 9/11 Memorial. When they visit, they will learn that the 21st century began with a great struggle between the forces of freedom and the forces of terror. They will learn that this generation of Americans met its duty. We did not tire, we did not falter, and we did not fail. They will learn that freedom prevailed because of their desire for liberty in the lives of the heart of every man, woman, and child on earth. We can be optimistic about the future because we've seen the character and the courage of those who defend liberty. We have been privileged to live amongst those who have volunteered to spread the foundation of peace and justice, which is freedom. Thank you.
This time I'd like to ask the Mayor of Fall River come up and say a few words. Mayor?
Thank you. Good morning. First and foremost, a few thanks. First and foremost, this place looks incredible. I want to thank Battleship Cove, the Dennises, the volunteers that were able to really beautify this area in anticipation of this event and for our community to enjoy our Battleship Cove and waterfront. Today is such an emotional day. Every single year, when it comes to this day, it is very, very tough for anyone to come up here and give any of the proper words that even can do any justice to the families that lost so many innocent people 18 years ago. And it really just becomes such an emotional moment where it makes me think of my role as mayor and our fire and police and EMS staff and the absolute tragedy of the events of September 11th. I was just 9 years old on that day, and many people here were a lot older than me and remember the events more clearly. But even as a kid, even as a child, I remember leaving school. I didn't know what was going on. We left school, we went home, we watched some television and saw the events unfold on every single station in America. And that day was a total tragedy and so much innocence just totally destroyed. And I think it just, the message 18 years later is that you can never forget. You can never forget the events of that day. You can never minimize them. You can never turn your back on the individuals that fight for this country each and every day, whether that's overseas, whether that's in a fire, whether that's at a robbery. The people that keep us safe are the true heroes in America. The people that lost their lives are the true victims of senseless nonsense and senseless violence and terror. And really the message that I want to leave everyone with this morning, and it really is an emotional one, is these individuals, these 3,000 plus people on September 11, 2001, 18 years ago, left their families early in the morning, taking a train into New York City, into Washington, D.C., driving their car. Maybe they hugged their loved one on the way out. Maybe some of their children were still asleep. Maybe their children were at school. They were going as a normal American citizen to their normal job, their everyday job, whether it was on the top floor, the bottom floor, whether it was in the Pentagon, whether it was just in an airplane. And they never came home. They never had the chance to say goodbye to their loved ones, and that pain will never go away. Those families lost fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, and those people will never come back. And it is our responsibility as Americans to honor their victimization of terror. It is our ability and our responsibility to honor and thank our police officers and firefighters and EMS staff every single day. It is our responsibility as Americans and as elected officials to ensure that these individuals have the best tools and support to do their jobs, because the fight was not over on September 11th. It continued long after, whether it was at war overseas, whether it was cancer battles that so many firefighters and individuals faced because of the attacks, whether it was the loss and the hole in people's hearts of a family member that they'll never see again. It is our responsibility as Americans to remember those events, to come together, to support each other, to come together, to rise up as the greatest nation in the world. And that is what makes America so great. That is what protects the ultimate gift that we have that the rest of the world is jealous of, our freedom, our ability to take care of each other in times of need, and our ability to never waver at any destructive force that wants to take our freedoms away. So today and every day, remember those that lost their lives on September 11th. Kiss and hug your loved ones, hold them tight, because it doesn't just take a terrorist attack of that magnitude. It can be gun violence. It can be any kind of attack at any moment. So thank these individuals that are here. I have the utmost respect for them, and just God bless each and every one of our public safety staff. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless each and every one of your families. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you, Mayor Correa. My apologies, I missed the Register of Deeds, Brad McDermott. Brad, would you just stand up to be recognized? Where is he? Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to call on the Fall River Fire Chief, Chief Lynch and I go back many years. I just want you to know that every day this man is solid, has lots of integrity, and is a close personal friend. Chief Lynch.
Good morning. It's always good to have a fan like the Colonel on your side. I'd like to recognize the Honor Guard right now because for 18 years I've been attending this event and they always look so sharp. And today, for some reason, they look especially sharp. And they always seem to bring such dignity to such a solemn and sober event. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending the 9/11 Memorial Ceremony. I would like to especially thank all the public safety members from law enforcement, emergency medical services, the fire department, and special services. A big thank you to Battleship Cove President Bond, the 9/11 Committee, and especially the workers of Battleship Cove for working so diligently and tirelessly to put this event together. Thank you to the citizens of Fall River for turning out to this solemn event, for keeping it going. I have recently returned from Ireland and was struck by how differently security measures were between going to Ireland and then when returning back to America. While both were stringent, the security measures coming back to America were far more stronger and stringent. Some may regard this as a weakening on our freedom to travel. And while it has, I look at it as a strengthening of all our other freedoms. As the days after September 11, 2001 unfolded, it became evident that the terrorists had failed. They had not brought us to our knees, but they had awoken us from a lethargic sleep. We had become complacent as a nation. We had come to take our freedoms for granted. As the Twin Towers shook and fell, we were woken to a new resolve that we as a nation would not be broken. We all took out our American flags and flew them proudly. We donated to good causes. We treated everyone with kindness. We said hello to strangers on the street. We were a unified nation, unified by tragedy. Over time, that spirit has slowly eroded again. We as a nation are beginning to fall asleep again. I say, do not wait for another tragedy to awaken us. Protect our freedoms. Protect our freedoms by using them. Fly our flag. Donate to good causes. Be kind to people. Say hello to strangers on the street. One thing that has not eroded in these 18 years is our resolve that we will never forget those brave souls that day who were lost. The police, EMS, and first responders. This day has been exalted and transformed from a memorial to the fallen to a celebration of heroes, from the greatest and the freest nation on earth. For those of you who have visited the 9/11 Museum at Ground Zero, one of the first passages that greets you is on a wall. It's a quote from the Roman poet Virgil. "No day shall pass, no day shall erase you from the memory of time." And I can tell you, standing before you, a big tough fireman, that when I read that in that hallowed hall, I cried. And it's been tough for me to go back a second time because the impact of the sacrifices of that day struck me so deeply. Hopefully someday I'll find it in me to go back again and say a prayer to those people, those brave souls. We should never forget that sometimes heroes do not wear uniforms or badges, but they wear the clothes of the everyday citizens. They too should be honored. They perished in the grasses of Pennsylvania. They were ground to dust alongside the police, EMS, and firefighters in the Twin Towers of New York. They died alongside the military personnel in the Pentagon. No day shall erase you from the memory of time. For those of you who have been here before, who remember the story I'm about to tell you, and for you who it's your first time, I would like you to listen closely and visit this place that I'm going to speak of. When 9/11 happened, I was like many people. I was affected by it, but I had no personal attachment to anybody that perished. While my brother firefighters and brother police officers in EMS perished, that was the connection I had. But I didn't know anyone personally, not a firefighter, not a police officer, nobody on the airplane, nobody in the Twin Towers. Then one day I was riding my motorcycle on a roadway that goes from Woods Hole to Falmouth, a beautiful road. And at the top of this hill, there's a lighthouse. It's unmistakable. It's Nobska Lighthouse. Visit it, pull in a parking lot. Take the time to walk across the street. And there's a little dirt path that winds down the hillside. Beautiful view. And just off the path, there's a bench with a monument stone in front of it. So that day, years ago, when I took the time to get off my motorcycle and walk down that path, I sat down on the bench and I looked at that memorial stone. It was dedicated to a woman. Her name was Nellie Ann Heffernan Casey. And I noticed on that stone it said that she had died September 11th, 2001. Did not say that she was on the plane, in the tower, but she had died that day. And as I looked out in that peaceful scene, as you look over Nantucket Sound, I thought about Nellie Ann Heffernan Casey. And so I Googled her, I went back, and I found out that she worked for TJ Maxx. It was on Flight 11, on a trip cross country, on business. She left behind her young daughter and her husband. I read more about her. I wanted to know what this woman was all about. And I was so sad that an ordinary person, just going about her business, could have perished like that. When I went to the memorial after that, I'd always look at her name embedded in the monument. And then the first time and the last time that I went to the museum and was so affected, I went by this hall. It's a dark hall, and there are voices of the survivors, of the victims who perished at 9/11, talking about their loved ones. And as I walked by that hall, I heard the voice of a woman, and she was talking about her friend, Nellie Ann Heffernan Casey. Maybe you think it's eerie, maybe you think it's coincidence, but I think it's so much more. I believe in God, and I believe in the goodness of good people, and I believe she was one of them. I've laid some flowers on the memorial by her name. And if you could all take the time today, stop by and say a prayer for Nellie Ann Heffernan Casey. Say a prayer for the police, paramedics, firefighters, and all the good people of this world. Grasp the torch of our fallen heroes. Hold it high, hold it proud. For if our ranks thin, if we fall asleep, the forces of evil will grow and win. God bless all. God bless this great country of ours. Be safe all. Be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Lynch. This time I'd like to ask Deputy Chief Cullen from the Fall River Police Department to the podium to say a few words.
First of all, it's an honor to be here today, and it's a privilege for the Fall River Police Department to participate every year. Our Police Honor Guard is here, and also to stand with our brothers and sisters in the Fall River Fire Department and also the city EMS. It's important today to salute the public safety officials, police, fire, and EMS that died on 9/11. And I think today, one accomplishment, it brought everybody together. Today, I was very impressed with the amount of people that took time to be here today to pay tribute to what happened. And also, I think it's very important going forward. We cannot forget the police, fire, and EMS that are suffering today, that have health issues today, and they need support. And it's very important that they receive that today moving forward. Again, thank you for letting the Fall River Police Department be part of this ceremony today.
Thank you, Chief Cullen. I'd like to ask at this time the former, if you will, Master of Ceremonies, Carl Sawejko, to come up and say a few words. Carl?
Good morning, everybody. That was a bit of a surprise. I can't tell you, after listening to all the words that were spoken this morning, that 18 years have gone by. And I listened to each of these stories carefully. I was thinking about 9/12, not 9/11. 9/12 was a different day in America. Everybody hugged people they never knew. Everybody cried with people they never saw. Everybody spoke to each other as a country with one language. The language was love, the language was compassion, and the language was America. I bet that each and every one of you, like me, probably did not have anyone that was either directly affected or knew of a particular story, but I bet you that if your telephone rang and someone said, "Could you come and help?" The sentence would not have been finished before you would have run over to wherever that person asked to do whatever you could to help out. Because that's how we felt. That was the America of 9/11 that caused 9/12 to begin. And as Chief Lynch so eloquently said, people were very different that day. Have things changed? Time changes everything. There's no doubt about it. And unless something happens on a regular basis, a salute to those who lost their life. If nothing else had changed, another salute to those who gave their lives. This is an America that is different on 9/12 from 9/11. And as the chief said, we never want to forget what happened on that day and what each of us can do to make sure that that never happens again. He's absolutely right. The terrorists failed miserably. Yet they took with them almost 3,000 souls that we will never get back. But it's those souls and their memory that keep us going on 9/12. So even though you remember 9/11, try to act as you did on 9/12. We have more people to speak, we have more reflections, but you know what? Today is really not only about the victims, but it's all about the responsibilities that you and I have to this country and to our fellow man. We were put on this earth to help someone else. It feels much better to give than it does to receive. Don't ever forget that. We have a country, we have a city, we have a community, we have families and relatives that need us. They need our forgiveness, they need our encouragement, and they need our help. And Battleship Cove will always be a beacon to remember those that lost their lives as the state's designated memorial for 9/11 that was chosen so carefully by the legislature back then. This place remains as hallowed ground for us never to forget. So to all of you who made the effort to come here today, go back and tell your friends and your family about what you experienced on 9/12. Don't ever forget 9/11, and let's try to keep 9/12 alive. God bless each and every one of you for what you do for your community and for each other. God bless all of those at Battleship Cove who carry on the mission that we must keep this memorial alive to pay tribute to those who gave their lives in all the conflicts in our country, both past and future, as a beacon of hope for America. And may God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Our next speaker, I am proud to say, I really have a lot of knowledge about him. On 9/11, I was driving across the Brightman Street Bridge. A small plane had crashed into the first tower. Small plane, no. Large plane filled with Americans. Short time later, I got a call to come back to the office. And then the sheriff reached out to New York and said Bristol County is ready to come if they need it. And sure enough, the call came, and the sheriff took 50 people from the Bristol County Sheriff's Office to New York, led us down there, right to ground zero. I remember watching him dig up on the first tower. It was a very traumatic experience. The sheriff is a leader, and I'm happy to say my boss, Sheriff Thomas Hodgson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. On 9/11 every year, I like to look back and count life's blessings. We all know living in today's world isn't easy, so I try to take a few minutes every year on this day to reflect on my life and the good times that make me smile every day. My loving wife, Joanne, has been my partner, my rock, and my best friend for decades. I speak with or visit my two daughters almost every day. I walked one of them down the aisle last year, and I can't wait to do the same with my other daughter next year. My grandsons love playing baseball, but not as much as I love going to watch their games. Every day I wake up as the sheriff of Bristol County, Massachusetts, a special place full of special people. I have the best job in the world. I work with the best people in the world, and I have the best family and friends in the world. And every year on 9/11, when I count my blessings, I always remember that it all could have ended on that frightful day in 2001. I was standing on the front steps of the U.S. Capitol when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. I was in Washington for a hearing on a criminal justice bill. When the first plane hit, there was a lot of confusion around Washington. No one thought it was a terror attack. Most thought it was a pilot error or an accidental crash. Let's face it, terrorist attacks weren't necessarily on the minds as a risk or worry for most of Americans. When the second plane hit, word started to spread around D.C. that it was a terrorist attack. People started evacuating the office buildings around the Capitol. I was in the congressman's office when we were interrupted by a knock on the door, and an aide walked in and said, "Congressman, the Pentagon's just been hit." We were told that we needed to evacuate within minutes. After a couple of hours, I was able to get through the jammed telephone lines and reach my anxious wife and staff. In the hours and days after the attacks, I learned about the heroic passengers on United Flight 93 who sacrificed their lives by storming the cockpit and forcing the plane down in a remote field in Pennsylvania instead of its intended target, the U.S. Capitol, right where I was standing earlier that morning. I learned that United 93 was delayed taking off at Newark International Airport in New Jersey by almost 45 minutes. This delay meant that the passengers on that Flight 93 called their loved ones. They were able to learn about the suicide attacks on the World Trade Center minutes earlier. If the flight was never delayed, it may have been occurring at the same time, and those passengers may never have felt the urge to storm the cockpit as they were originally told the plane was turning around and heading back to the airport. On this 9/11 and every 9/11, we pause to remember those who lost their lives that day and every day since. We remember the first responders who died that day or in the years following. We remember the people who were just going about their day at the office or hopping a flight to the West Coast. And we remember all the heroes, those who gave their lives to save countless others. I remember the passengers of Flight 93. Only God knows what may have happened if that flight was never delayed. Only God knows where it would have crashed had they not stormed that cockpit. America owes a great debt and a ton of gratitude to the heroes who saved so many lives on 9/11. I am particularly thankful and forever grateful. As Rudy Giuliani once said, we saw the absolute worst of humanity, and we saw the absolute best. May God bless the great county of Bristol, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and may God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Sheriff. At this time, I'd like to introduce Colonel James Beal from the U.S. Naval War Academy in Newport, Rhode Island. Colonel Beal.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, all the distinguished guests and visitors, and special to the policemen, the firemen, and the various EMS personnel. 18 years ago, our world changed forever. 2,977 people lost their lives in the terrorist attacks on 9/11 at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in rural Pennsylvania. We gather here today to remember the men and women who lost their lives that day, that put their service to their country above service to themselves. To the policemen, firemen, first responders, and countless others whose acts of heroism and compassion were too numerous to count. These men and women from all backgrounds and all walks of life who came together and rose to the occasion to help their fellow man on that fateful day. To the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, when their country called, these men and women chose not to take a knee, but to instead raise their hands in commitment to support and defend the Constitution and the values and principles that make this country great. Everyone in this crowd that's old enough to remember 9/11 knows exactly where they were and exactly what they were doing. Just like our parents and grandparents knew on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, they knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. Both days are pivotal events in our nation's history, with inextricable ties to today's ceremony. We remember 9/11 today in the shadow of the USS Massachusetts that was commissioned into active service less than 6 months after the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Out of the immense suffering of those two attacks came a tremendous show of strength and resolve. Admiral Yamamoto, who was the mastermind of the Pearl Harbor attacks, is quoted to have said, quote, "I fear all we have done today is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve." That resolve is a testament to the spirit of the men and women of this country that set it apart from every other in history. I remember where I was on 9/11. I was a young lieutenant with 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked aboard the USS Dubuque. We had just got done with 2 weeks of live fire training exercise in the Australian outback. My fellow lieutenants and I were in a bar in Darwin, Australia, watching the attacks on 9/11 unfold. We quickly realized that our world has changed forever. And in less than 6 hours, our ships had set sail and we were embarked on our way to the Indian Ocean off the coast of Pakistan. And shortly after that, we found ourselves on the ground in the harsh terrain and climate of Afghanistan and Pakistan. My story is far from unique, though. There are hundreds of thousands of men and women from all walks of life of our society that have made a commitment to their neighbors, to their cities and towns, and to their country. The preponderance of these young men and women are from the millennial generation. A generation that has been called the me generation. A generation that has been identified by traits of narcissism and a sense of entitlement. Tell that to Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter, who jumped on a grenade in Afghanistan to shield his fellow Marines. Tell that to Officer Jonathan Schmidt, an Arkansas police officer who shoved his supervising officer out of the way and took a bullet and later died. Do those actions sound like the me generation, a generation with a sense of entitlement? As a student of history, while searching for the right words for this occasion, I turned to the Greek historian Thucydides and his account on the Peloponnesian War between the city-states of Athens and Sparta. And that is what I'd like to close with, the words of Pericles, who was a great Athenian general and statesman. Pericles was considered one of the greatest generals and statesmen in Athens. And in the end of the first year of the war in 431 BC, he delivered, as was custom at the time, a funeral oration to honor the war dead. However, Pericles broke with tradition of honoring the dead through heroism on the battlefield. He instead chose to honor the dead by glorifying the achievements of the city for which they died. He spoke of Athens' advancement of democracy and the rights of its citizens, not by birth or by class, but by merit and capacity. He affirms that the soldiers gave their lives in the cause to protect the city of Athens, its citizens, and its freedoms. Pericles comforts the families of the war dead by acknowledging their grief and ease their years with the knowledge that their sons died with honor. Pericles, to an audience of wives, parents, family members, but also the citizens of Athens, said, I quote, "Comfort, not condolence, is what I offer to the parents of the dead who may be here. Numberless are the chances to which, as they know, the life of man is subject. But fortunate indeed are they who draw for their lot a death so glorious as that which has caused your mourning, and to whom life has been so exactly measured as to terminate in the happiness in which it has been passed." Thank you, everybody, for being here. Semper Fidelis, and may God bless America.
At this time, I would like to ask Chief Lynch, accompanied by both the police and fire chaplains, to please come up and take the wreath and post it at the PCC, along with Deputy Chief Cullen. This time I would like to ask Mr. Bill Damaris, U.S. Marine Corps retired, and his wife, Paula, the releasing of the doves.
As we all know, the white doves represent love, hope, and peace. That what we feel, and that's what we want for the victims of 9/11 for all people. As the white doves are released and fly heavenward, we ask everyone here to please send a special message of prayer for all those from 9/11 and all their families, and everyone who works to keep us safe every day. You may release the doves.
I'd also like to recognize at this time the representatives from Senator Kennedy and Keating's office who are here today. Thank you very much for coming. At this time, I would like to call on the chaplain of the Fall River Police Department, Chaplain Wahlberg.
The story is told that one night, Abraham Lincoln went with a friend on a fishing trip. In the middle of the night, he was suddenly awakened by his frantic companion who excitedly pointed to the shooting stars streaking across the sky. He cried, "Abe, Abe, the world is coming to an end." Lincoln peered beyond the shooting stars, and in a calm voice he replied, "Do not be afraid. The constellations are still in their places." The vision of God's protection should invigorate us to take the broken bits of our life and transform them into a mosaic of a new and productive life. They who say the world is coming to an end have no future. But those who, like Lincoln, see the fixed constellations amidst the disintegrating stars can build a future. 9/11 was a time of disintegrating stars, causing many to protest with reason. How can one have faith in such a world as this when we see such wickedness, terrorism, and the slow strangulation of human decency and morality as we witness the triumph of the wicked and the defeat of the righteous. However, the good in man still prevails, and the belief in God carries us through, for without faith in the divine power, men lose faith in each other. Faith takes the sufferings of the past and present and molds them into the happiness of the future. As we grapple with the difficulties of living, stumbling and groping in the darkness of the aftermath of 9/11, let us remember the example of our forefathers. To believe when all is fine is easy, but that is not true faith. To believe despite all the difficulties of believing, that is true faith. If we don't fight terrorism anywhere, we will find terrorism everywhere. May our faith strengthen us in our daily tasks. May our firm belief in the way of God give us the courage and confidence to continue to build a better world. May our faith in the future sustain us in molding the present for the glory of God and the betterment of humanity. Amen.
Before we close the ceremonies today, again, I would like to recognize Durfee High School, Greater New Bedford Regional High School, all of the firefighters who were here today, these great speakers who came to the podium to bring the message of 9/11. And again, we will close the ceremony by having the Navy Band play a medal. And I'm sorry, we're going to have Chief Bullitt, who just coughed and reminded me he's coming up here. Chief. I'll ask the color guard to now retire the colors. Thank you, Chief Bullitt. This concludes the ceremony. Thank you very much for coming.